Hello. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Brianne Rosner. I am the director of SNAG, and I hope you are all as excited as I am for this weekend. It's going to be awesome. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional homelands of the Monongahela culture and the Masawomek, the Shawandasi, Tula, and Osage nations. SNAG honors and respects the many diverse Indigenous peoples, both past, present, and yet to come, who are connected to the land that we are gathered on. You're in store for an inspiring weekend of presentations and demonstrations, forging connections between metalsmithing and blacksmithing. I'd like to thank those who contributed to the planning of this event. Mac Hendrickson, Anna Koplick, Tom Muir, Seth Papik, Courtney Powell, Katie Rarick, Stacy Rogers, and April Wood. I'd also like to thank our generous sponsors, Pepe Tools, Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths, the American Craft Council, and Society of Contemporary Craft in Pittsburgh, and of course, Touchstone for partnering with us to hold this event on their lovely campus. After the keynote presentation with Erica Moody, you'll have the opportunity to see demonstrations from Erica, Pete Braspinix, Rachel David, and Rachel Kettinger. And let's learn a little bit more about them before I introduce you to Erica.
Hello, I'm Pete Braspinix. I am a graduate of the University of Michigan School of Art and Design in 2004. I am an artist, blacksmith, and educator based near Grand Rapids, Michigan. My work primarily focuses on making modern forms and objects that are based on the traditional craft of handwork and blacksmithing.
My name is Rachel David. I live in Western North Carolina in a town called Waynesville. A long time ago, I went to school for Russian and Eastern European politics and literature and double majored in music. I dropped out and then I learned to weld and I worked at a plastics factory overnight and I traveled a lot after I stopped doing that too. I hopped trains for about a year and moved to Olympia, Washington, where I picked up going to college again. And my teacher told me about blacksmithing while I was struggling to do some kind of cockamamie weld. The teacher said I should get a hat and hammer on it to make it do what I wanted. And I had never heard about blacksmithing before that. It was mind-blowing. So I stopped going to school again. I took a class at Penland and actually finished my credits there. And I moved to New Orleans to work for a glass blowing equipment building company. After Hurricane Katrina, I rode my bike around Western North Carolina into Tennessee and Eastern Kentucky for a month. And when I got back, it was pretty crazy time to be a young person in a super busted city. So I went to boat welding school and I luckily got a job in my shop that I had been trying to build. And that while I was managing a building with studios in it, I tried to manage and I tried to practice and make stuff. I worked for museums for a couple 6 years, 7 years, and while I wasn't working for them doing preparatory work, I tried to practice and make stuff, and I got a bit better, and I started selling stuff more regularly. But still, no one in the metalworking community would hire me around there, and I didn't know anyone outside of New Orleans, and I was pretty isolated from any kind of quality metalworking. At some point, all of a sudden, I started traveling and meeting people in metalworking and blacksmithing, and started making friends with the Cooler Kids Club. And for then a long time, I traveled a lot, and I made more friends, and I worked a lot, and I worked for a few other people. And I realized that what I experienced as a younger person wasn't okay, and it wasn't normal, or it was normal, but it wasn't okay. And so I co-founded the Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths with Lacey Geertsen and Anne Bujold. Community building became more important to me, and working to do better in general, not only make better stuff, but do better in general. Speak truth to power, one might say. So then in 2020, everything kind of collapsed. I ended up moving to Western North Carolina, where I live now, and hopefully I'll just keep making more stuff.
Hello, my name is Rachel Kettinger, and I grew up in Wisconsin. My dad owned an auto salvage yard, and my mom worked at the local hospital. I went to school for metalsmithing at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and after, I took many opportunities to work around the country with various artists and businesses and schools, where I gained that knowledge that combines small metalsmithing skills with architectural ironwork and steelworking. I currently live in Philadelphia, where I have my own metal studio making enamelware and housewares, as well as working full-time for a lighting company, fabricating and managing. I make objects that use industrial processes in combination with handwork. I've learned over the years that striving for fine craft and showing the process of the hand in combination with each other makes each object unlike any other. At this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to enamel on steel sheet using liquid enamel. And I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you about your interests and any questions you have about the things I'm doing. Thank you.
I'm excited to have Erica Moody. Erica is a metal craftsman working in Mid-Coast, Maine, where she cultivates her line of forged and fabricated serving utensils and continues her crafts foundation of fabricating custom metal commissions for architects and designers, such as furniture and hardware. Her utensils have been featured in publications such as London's Financial Times, Bon Appetit, Savour, Metalsmith, and New Yorker's The Cut. Erica has taught at Massachusetts College of Art and Design, Wentworth Institute of Technology, Harvard Graduate School of Design, Penland School of Crafts, Haystack, Center for Metal Crafts, and the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship. And it is my pleasure to welcome Erica.
Thank you. Yes, I think I have it. We'll see. Thank you all of you guys for coming here. It's hard to get away from life, to be able to take a break like this, but it's great to be all together. We all need this inspiration and connection. So I'm not good at memorizing anything, so I have to read off of this, but I guess you did too, so it made me feel better. I'm honored to have this opportunity to speak at this intriguing event as well. Thank you, SNAG. Thank you, Touchstone, as well. We've been invited to gather here, share and connect. Some and that forging connections to bring blacksmiths and metalsmiths together was sort of the premise of this. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Blacksmiths and metalsmiths to come together. And I was thinking about this, and I don't know if I'm just out of the loop because I do feel like I live under a rock most of the time, but we're all metalsmiths. We smith metal, whether it's black, silver, gold, brown, steel, silver, whatever. It's, we're all smithing metal and learning various properties of various alloys and learning how to persuade each one to bend and melt, or more often than not, having the metal be the one to persuade us to keep trying and listening better, noticing more, slowing us down enough to appreciate the process until mutual understanding reveals the necessary steps that lead to a beautiful outcome that we make. I'm going to share a little bit of my story, some attempts and realities of becoming a metalsmith, and try to inspire, encourage each of you, all of us, in this work that we've chosen. This is a little pixelated, but I love the picture that I found online. Yes.
If you stand here or in the camera, then I get
Oh.
a good recording.
I'm in the camera now. Oh,
Yes.
I'm also
My
like,
apologies.
I need a stool.
Here, hold on.
Oh, is it just Annie?
Yeah,
on
we'll
this?
just move
Okay,
it like that.
that's better.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay, I wanted to be out in the front, but that's okay. To understand you guys better, just to see what we have here in the room, I just want to ask, how many of you are blacksmiths? Okay, that's great. And how many consider themselves jewelers? Ah, so it's a good mix. Fabricators, you just sort of forget that, you're just calling yourself a fabricator. And then how many people are hobbyists versus hobbyists, like not really doing this professionally? It's more of like playing around, which is fine. There's nothing against that. Early career, you're just starting out and like really diving into this as a potential long-term thing. Really get your hands up there. It's hard to see. Great. This is great. And how many are longtime professionals? Doesn't mean you're old or anything. It just yes, it does. How many are woodworkers? Oh, there's not many of you. That's okay. Jack of all trades. Come on, it's like probably all of you, right? So on my 6th grade report card, I'm going to go back a little bit. My teachers said I was a jack of all trades, and I thought that sounded pretty cool. But when I didn't really know if I really knew what it meant, and they said the whole phrase, where the latter part says it's a master of none, and I was crushed. I was like, what do you mean I'm not a master of anything? I just thought, it was fun learning. It was fun doing all of these different, learning all these different things. So I was crushed that I didn't seem to be excelling at anything. I wanted to master. I wanted to excel something. I wanted to learn something enough to have some language to it, or some dexterity around it. I loved learning. It was just hard to focus on one subject, and I didn't really want to just focus on one subject. I envied my dad's analytical and mechanical fix-its and my mom's exploration in drawing, printmaking, and art gallery excursions. I also knew I didn't want to dress up to work. That was probably the most important one for me. I was intrigued with the vocational programs at high school, like auto body work and drafting, but was steered away from that, perhaps due to gender or good grades that I had. They just were like, no, that's not your place. So I was making a lot of artwork, and jumped to college, and I started studying fine art, photography, and film. A mechanical and artistic combo that intrigued me. Mind you, this was pre-digital days, so there were a lot of knobs and levers. It was a very mechanical process. Although I liked the photographic and printing processes, and loved learning to push the boundaries of the medium, the end result of photography just didn't really speak to me. It also seemed like an expensive career path, which was definitely in my mind of like, what's going on with how I'm gonna make a living. I took a break from college to do some figuring, And I dropped into a city I didn't know, and I got a job. And I was around a lot of Harvard students because my roommates were Harvard grads, and I was at a party of theirs with a lot of very together looking people, but in the corner there were some scruffy guys, and I was like beelined over, and I was like, what do you do here? And, you know, I didn't realize Boston was so collegiate. And so I was about to move again, but I found them, and they were really great, interesting people that were working in the field of architectural craft. They didn't have a college degree. They were fine carpenters and metal workers building exceptional work for architects and their clients. I'd immediately felt a homecoming like I'd never felt before. I saw the inspiring industrial sized workspaces that they had with old machinery and the overlap of their own personal projects, such as working on wooden boats, repairing old furniture they found in the trash, house restorations, because they were able to buy cheap houses back then in the city. And these were all going on in the background using the skills that they were refining for their career, for their work. There didn't seem to be much ego and just a passion for refining their craft and community, and combining their professional life with their personal life. And this passion seemed fully supported as well, encouraged, challenged, and funded by benefactors who could appreciate the work. Well-to-do homeowners and successful small businesses were connected to craftsmen by managerial teams of architects and contractors who knew their work. I felt relieved at the idea of developing a craft that was about the engineering and the making, and not as much as developing all the concepts of trying to figure out a voice that I didn't seem to know yet, and how to work the gallery world to sell my artwork. The high-end building trades seemed more like a viable career to me. When looking for a craftsman to train me, I heard of a metal worker looking for an assistant who was willing to train me because I had no experience, and so I dove in. I had never thought before of fine metalworking as a job. Now I'll talk about my path of what has ended up being so far nearly a 30-year career, which is mind-blowing to me. So how did this happen, and how did I get where I am? For 7 years, I worked for this guy who hired me, doing architectural metalwork. His name is Pierre Trefor in Boston. He was a self-taught sculptor who is now fabricating architectural metalwork for architects and sculptors. The projects we worked on were complex and challenging. Pierre taught me fabrication skills such as welding, silver brazing, machining, forming, and sanding. We wrestled, persuaded, and engineered metals such as steel, stainless steel, aluminum, bronze, copper, and brass into refine projects such as this Cadillac of all stove hoods for a private residence. Large twisted mirror polished sculptures, handrails that were extremely sculptural and twisted, where we would clamp metal to racks and just torture them and then weld them together. But everything had to line up with the interior of a house. Room-sized wind tunnels for scientists, where they studied how birds glide in the little plexiglass box. That was at Harvard, which was so fun. This is one of my favorite pieces, even though it had nothing to do with an arts concept, but I loved how science and beauty would come together just from the needs of how the elements needed to work together. One of the reasons I love boat building, but it was such a great learning environment. Each project was a unique challenge to figure out how to make. We had to figure out how to bridge the gap between what a designer who had no metal experience had dreamt up and written on a napkin, and what was feasible, which stretched our capabilities to places we sometimes never wanted to go. I also realized in hindsight that the cheap, lousy equipment that he had was also a great learning tool, because we had to figure out how to make it work the way we wanted to do these incredibly refined projects. But it was great to see how simple tool, in hindsight, at the time it was extremely frustrating, but in hindsight, I was like, that was actually a pretty great way to learn how things go, how things work. like we had a woodworker's router. We didn't have a milling machine. I don't know if a lot of you know, it's like a glorified drill press. We didn't have one of those. So we had a router, an old used router that we had hooked up on a variac to turn the speed down. And then we would make aluminum guide rails and stuff over the metal and move it along to like mill out precision joinery that we silver brazed pieces together. This one project, we were using it to do that, to make these really beautiful big bronze framework for gorgeous stained glass in the stained glass dome of the Boston State House. And we were like using this little router. It's just absurd. While working with him, I was realizing that I kind of like this kind of work, despite all the challenges, or maybe because of them. The learning was intense, and the feeling of strength and success of what sometimes seemed impossible was not only a thrill, but gave me a confidence that I'd never been able to find. Throughout school, I'd struggled with extreme social anxiety and shyness, and this opportunity was giving me a foothold out of this. I wanted to continue to grow and excel at the craft, and thought it may be best to get out and learn other ways of metalworking from other metal craftsmen and see what their approaches and techniques were. I figured I'd start by going back to the basics, the craft basics, blacksmithing. I'd heard of a master blacksmith out in Santa Fe named Frank Turley, who offered month-long intensives. I had no money, so therefore I quit my metalworking. So before I quit my metalworking job, while I had a record of employment, I loaded up on the 0% interest credit cards that you get and decided to make a road trip across country so that after the class, I would continue driving out to West Coast and back, calling all the Abana contacts, the American Artist Blacksmiths of America contacts, to try to find someone to teach me, to continue teaching me now that I had a month-long intensive of blacksmithing. Let's see, I lost my place here. Yeah, so, and I also wrote a ton of letters all around from British artist blacksmiths and trying to find some place that I could go to learn. And I didn't get any responses back. I found a couple of jobs going across country, but it was like $10 an hour, and I had student loans. I already was in the, rat wheel world race of, bills and stuff. So I couldn't afford to do it. I sometimes wonder if I had signed my letters Eric instead of Erica, it would have made a difference. I'm not sure. But I was running out of the credit card credit, so I had to head back to the East Coast to make money again. And I thought I should continue doing more of what I was trained to do, and was cocky enough to think I could just start my own business. I found a full-time job at a production metal lighting shop that I'd worked for occasionally, and persuaded them to allow me to use the shop after hours for my first commissions. I also took on a second job waitressing to help pay off my credit card debt and my student loans that were still looming over me. And after paying off that, it was actually accumulating money fairly well. So I was like, well, I should probably keep this two-job thing going to build up resources towards starting the business. I also had no business experience whatsoever. So I found a business class to take for figuring out what the hell is this about, and does it, let's get some chops on that side of the game going. And then soon after, I had a friend offer to share a raw unheated garage space. Well, this is actually work I did at Frank Turley's, which was a great class. I don't even know if he's around anymore. No? Did he? I'm sorry. He was old when I did that in 2001, or no, in 1994. No, I can't remember, whenever it was. So this was my first shop space. A friend said we had this unheated garage we could build out. The image is pixelated because that was the best digital camera you could get at the time. And this was 2001. And we bought machines that would complement each other and worked in this cold, dark space for some time until the landlord offered more space in the building. So we expanded and a third metalworker joined us. We had to wire the space ourselves. I remember holding a 2x4 to be ready to knock my shopmate off the electrical panel that he was bolt cutting to access the 3-phase to be able to get in there. So it was quite a journey. And you know, so we were wiring the space, putting in lights, and I got a used pellet stove to stay warm. This was in Boston, which I bought it used on Craigslist, and I still have it to this day. Many repair parts later, but it's awesome. We started growing out of the space. We each were growing, but it was great to start that way with a shared space. We shared equipment, we shared labor, supported each other that way. It was a great way to start growing, and we grew fast, and it went down to just one of us eventually. Where's my time? I feel like probably have to speed through this. I had to come up with a business name. I had to start marketing. I had to figure out what to do, you know, to promote myself. I took a bunch of pictures of the equipment, put it on a postcard. Like it looked like I had a lot of work that I'd been doing. It was just the machines though. I didn't want to reveal that I was a petite gal working by herself and wanted to stay specialized in high-end metalwork because that's what I had come to know. And sort of say, if you want it and it looks beautiful, it's like a challenging project and you can pay for it, then I'll make it. Small, big, whatever, I'll figure it out, which was a thrill and a terror. Sorry, I gotta get back in here. I felt encouraged by the skills I'd already learned, and I really enjoyed the challenge of accepting a daunting commission. It was akin to jumping off a cliff. It was requiring a leap of faith. I marketed and networked by looking through local home decor magazines to find architects whose work I admired, mailing postcards. Email wasn't really that big back then. And finding where they gathered, and I went to make small talk, which is not my thing. I would stand in the corner with a friend and we would just gesture like creatively, pretending like we were talking about something interesting, and it worked really well. They'd come over and we'd start talking. And you'd get a lot of good food that way too. They had like sushi. The architects knew how to do it, right? And my first real break was when an architect friend introduced me to his boss and to see if I could work with them. And they were about to hire an established large metal shop to build 60 steel desks for a fancy, hip new office. And they showed me an example of the other shop's work and the desire for a rough industrial look. But it looked pretty crappy to me. And I thought I could do a lot better than that, but I wasn't sure if they wanted better because they wanted the rough industrial look. So it was kind of like, I don't know. But I decided to put extra effort in it, and I made it look rough industrial, but in a really refined way. And they loved it. They'd never seen metalwork that was done like that. And they hired me to do the whole job, which was great, but terrifying because now I had to make all of these pieces. But it worked. And they were my first and main resource for work and references, and they remain that for me today. They're my main contacts 21 years later. I pushed that project a bit. Well, I already said that, right? Okay. Yeah, so then more jobs started coming in, and interns were hired, and then first employees were hired. And we brought to life napkin sketches and continued to work on learning architectural drawing and making handrails and restaurant signage and furniture and a lot of other crazy projects. So it was up and running. It was exciting. I was busier than I could handle. And eventually I had to move into my own space. It was nervous to jump into my own space, but I did it. Another leap of faith. And then that was 2008. And I don't know if you guys remember that 2008 was kind of a rough year. So it was a bit crazy, but I ended up, it turned into an opportunity because I started looking around for teaching, thinking, maybe I have some experience here that I can teach, but I have no degree. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but it did somehow through my connections. A lot of folks, all these architects taught at schools. And they were able to get me some jobs teaching at Mass College of Art and Design in Wentworth, teaching model making for industrial designers and metalwork. And I really loved teaching. It was a really great way to help me continue to grow. doing that. And then I also started to see other craft places that I could teach, which I didn't feel like I could teach at a craft school because I don't have it was more welding and fabrication, which isn't really taught very much in a lot of the craft schools in a high-end sort of way, at least that I'm not aware of. So I proposed a class to wooden boat school because I loved wooden boats and I love sailing. And I thought trying to marry these two things together to stay close to what I'm interested in. And I was living on a sailboat at the time and trying to figure out how to downscale my metalworking experience to go traveling and cruising on the boat to South America. Like, how do you do that? It's like tricky, not much space. So I proposed the class that it was possible, but I didn't really know how to do it, but I figured if they accepted, then I'd have to figure it out. And that's what happened. And it ended up being a really great class of teaching people how to do structural metalwork in a small way with not many tools, where you could go to a hardware store, you could get a map bottle of gas and some silver brazing solder, which jewelers use, which happens to be extremely structurally strong. And you can make tools, you can do repairs, you can make hardware, and you can do it on the go. The bottles fit into the bilge really nicely. And so that was another really great thing. And then I started designing. The first designing I did on my own were pieces that the students would make. So this is some of the shop space I was in where it expanded. It's a bigger space of it in Boston, where I had the 3 shop mates. You can see some of the steel desks that I'd continued to be making. There's a lot of other projects going on in there, handrails. That's my corner of the shop. Each of us had our own corner. That's me, probably in like 2004 or 5, bending some handrails, one of the few things that I had designed. And then this is my final shop space in Boston, where I had a nice office. I built out the glass sliding door and opened this door to the shop space so my dog could see us while we worked, because she was having a hard time in the other shop. And plus it was just a cool thing to design, a nice space. This is the big space behind the office, and this is a custom chair I was working on. And so this is my own space with a lot of room for building 60 desks and storing them and such. This is signage for a restaurant that I cut all the pieces and had them powder coated and patinaed bronze and steel, and it would hang on a restaurant in Cambridge. The handrail I was bending in the picture before. This is the chair that was on the table before, which is very tricky, where you had hot forged bends, but machined handshake joints that were pinned and welded, where you sanded the weld afterwards, so you don't see where they are. And the panels, the colored panels, are aluminum that were removable. So I had little machine blocks that they would screw into underneath, but the panels need to be removable, but tight. So I had to figure out the tolerance of the powder coat after it was fabricated to fit in. It was the designer drives me crazy, but this was kind of the interesting thing. It would be such a pain in the ass to do it, but when it was done, it was like, wow, look at this. Look at this. And then no one's going to appreciate the hard work that went into that either. Oh, good. Good. Steel signs for restaurants, it's welded steel. I'd cut strips and weld them together and tack weld them. And I would have everything painted, because then I could blame them if anything went wrong. Conference desk angle that was fabricated to be cleaner than structural angle. Parts that had to assemble for different paint colors. This is a glass room that an architect designed. And so I did all the stainless steel hardware that I had to engineer how it would bolt to the glass and assemble, where you didn't really have any, it was just a very sleek design. And these were, it was around the whole room. And then now we're getting to the wooden boat school projects of my first designs of building these compasses and double gauges for the students to make. And they really had great reception. People wanted to buy them. And this was this first sort of glimmer of like, this is kind of interesting. This is fun to design this stuff. And I'll go back. And so I started thinking about making it my own project. Where are we on time? 9:41. I just want to leave some room for questions. So yeah, I never made it to South America, but I had a great workshop that I would bring around to boat schools and wood shops and places that didn't have a metal shop, and bring metalworking to that so that people could learn in a weekend or a week enough that they could go home and carve out a little place in their closet or garage and be able to do things that were beautiful if they wanted, but structurally sound things. Because metalworking was so empowering. I just wanted to spread it around a little bit more so you didn't feel like you had to do a big shop. You didn't have to invest a lot of money in it. And after, yeah, so teaching helped me. So all this teaching helped me sustain the shop space during this rough housing crunch, financial disaster of 2008 time. I also had more of those zero interest credit cards to help feed me. I would not recommend that, by the way, just saying. And I also ate enough peanut butter jelly sandwiches that I could not eat them anymore. But this client slowly came back, and I became incredibly busy again with commissions, yet still was strained financially. I worked all the time, not because I was a workaholic, but because I had to make ends meet. Even though the jobs were financially large, there were so many risks with custom metalwork of such a wide range of small hardware to multiple floors of stair rails. They were so unique. You had to reinvent the wheel each time. You didn't know how it was going to go. Material and subcontractor costs could change or have difficulties in coming through correctly or on time. It was a lot for a small business that didn't have much fluff in their operation costs, and one wrong move along the line and fistful of money would go out the window. None of you probably have experienced that before. I was trying to figure out how to refine the process and recalculating how I was charging, looking where I could delegate tasks, how could I develop systems and time management that worked more efficiently, but I was burning out on the chase emotionally and financially. In 2014, I moved to Maine as a last-ditch effort to find a way to have more balance in my business and in my life. I hoped that I could live and work in the same space, making the overhead less costly than renting a shop space in the city. I could focus on smaller projects that were similar in scale and technique and surround myself with more nature and quiet. With some research, it seemed that Maine had a strong building market for my commission resources and had proximity to the ocean, which I came to love so much. And it was still closing to my aging family and had affordable property. So I made the next leap of faith. I lived out of my office back in Boston for 3 months while I built out the shop space in the barn. I continued client projects and teaching until the last minute. And then when the space was ready to go, it was a quick transition with little or no downtime. I couldn't afford to take the time off. And at first, the move seemed to go fairly well until my attention was pulled from the business side of things into figuring out how to navigate a very difficult ongoing personal struggle that was becoming insurmountable. I basically just could not focus and work on anything. And it became difficult to manage the business. I couldn't meet deadlines and coordinate with homeowners, architects, and contractors as I started to fall apart. On a dark day, I wandered into my shop looking for something to make, feeling guilty at not getting anything done that was supposed to get done. So much overdue work, emails, where is this, where is that, when's this going to be done? And I made a spoon. I hammered out a copper bowl, cutting out brass sheet into a handle, riveting it together. It was soothing and absorbing to focus on something new, making decisions that seemed simple and also up to me, no deadlines, no clients to impress, just to make something. Letting my hands do the work, but leaving open what was to come of it. I remember that spoon being made so clearly. I actually have it to this day as my coffee scoop, and it's a rattly, beat up thing. And I don't fix it because it's just it's just every day I have it there and I remember. It gave me some kind of solace and peace of mind, a break from my sore mind and heart. And I realized how powerful creating my own work can be. It helped me get back into the healthier balance of body, mind, and heart in a new way forward. I was drawn to the idea of making a tool that would celebrate a ritual, whether personal or communal, and a tool that celebrated sustenance like cozy food. I thought it was time to try promoting my own designs for more flexibility for the responsibilities life called for than what my commission work could provide. I asked around for the best social media platform to promote it, decided on just using one, made a few more spoons to post, and it started to take off faster than I expected. I studied how to work efficiently with the platform to build an audience. Within a few months, I was given an order from Eating Tools, which was a really beautiful, it still is, beautiful wholesaler in New York City. And within a few months, and then learning to work with social media led to direct sales from my website, contacts from galleries, wholesalers, press, and teaching requests. It was such a powerful, powerful resource or tool for the business. I wanted to grow slow as I learned how to navigate pricing and how to efficiently make multiples of a creative piece. And it seemed I found the next promising path. When I started my career in metalworking, I found power in being able to build something. And now I'm finding power in being able to design what I build. That personal struggle I mentioned before drove me to a place where I came back to my basics, my core drive. I could see that I now had the dexterity of a language of metalsmithing to start cultivating my own voice. It also showed me how magic can happen, even if stepping away from responsibilities for a moment, the world doesn't end. It just recalibrates if you can let it, which is a lesson that I have carried with me since then, because it's just so important to take a moment to take a break, because it's so hard sometimes when you're just driving and driving and driving and you start to feel more miserable or just not right. Taking that step back, taking this weekend, taking time, it's a powerful thing. Things won't fall apart. I mean, maybe they will, but they come back together again. Maybe not in the way that you expect. Writing this for you has been an interesting, let's see, did I skip one? I skipped a paragraph. It's now been 7 years of developing my servingware designs, my own work, which has become the majority of my work alongside the architectural commissions, which I've chosen to keep the architectural commissions, even though they're all smaller now, because I feel like it's a smarter business choice to keep things in the same sort of size, scale, technique, instead of doing what I was doing before, which I don't regret because I really learned the material so well doing that range of stuff. It wasn't a smart business move, but as far as learning the material and the craft, I think it really pushed me. But I chosen to keep both sides because they keep a diversification that broadens my audience base as well. And it keeps it more interesting for me because I keep learning when architects come up with these crazy ideas. It also keeps alive the story of my history of my craft for people. I see people are interested to know that that background was there. But both of them celebrate the handmade object, which I believe builds a connection between us as human beings in an increasingly sterile and digital world. The maker and the user can sense each other, even if we're strangers. The craftsman makes a tool for the user, who uses this tool to heighten a task. And in seeing the marks of the hammer of the maker, an intimate connection is made. It's a quiet but powerful dialogue, even if the other is not visible. Being a craftsman gives me a voice, something I never acknowledged I even had or thought important, but now I can recognize its presence all along. And I sense how important it is to pay attention to it and to cultivate it. Writing this for you has been an interesting exercise for me to reflect back and see what happened all these years and look for common threads in my drive and decision-making. I've always felt that my goal was to create a lifestyle that was fulfilling, not just to chase a career. I have a feeling that many of you feel the same. We make this choice to do what we do, and although sometimes such a thrill, it's a challenging choice to make as it's undervalued in our culture, therefore hard to make a living at it. And maybe it doesn't even seem like a choice, but we're driven to do what we do and then struggle to figure out how to make it work. We work hard or even harder than the doctors we go to help sort our minds and bodies, but they make way more per hour. But we are not just metalsmiths, but we're lifesmiths. We live close to our hearts and passions, close to the people and our communities. I realize I've stayed close to my core needs, more or less, and my core beliefs as I traveled this path, noticing the process and what feels right and what feels wrong in my heart. I've experimented with ways to forge ahead, still keeping my eyes open to the findings, the bits connecting it all together, to inform me on my next steps. I feel so grateful to have found metalworking, as I believe it has been transferring its properties onto me over time, giving me a foundation of strength, minimal in its efficiency, built to last, graceful, anchored, ore of the earth, acknowledging its ability to transform its state of pliability, and so many other cheesy metaphors. This is my story, though, of finding my faith and voice and what's inspired me. Everyone's journey is unique, and you just have to keep listening. It's so important to keep listening and stay open and stay curious and enjoy the process, not necessarily the goal. And most importantly, to take care of each other and to support each other as well as yourself, because communities like this is just, it's so important to keep going. And knowing some of you already in coming here since I've started making the utensils, the community has been so much bigger and warmer and larger than when I was a metal craftsman, architectural metal craftsman. And it means the world to me, both on Instagram and here, and knowing some of you are going to be here. It's just like so heartwarming. So definitely support yourself as well as each other on this. So thank you. So I forgot about the slides. This is me and my dad starting to build out the barn with a big pile of daunting gravel, which we cleared out. This is the barn space as we're redoing some of the floor. This is in the middle of insulating the walls after the cement was poured. A mess. This is it several years ago from the outside. This is it now. I have the pellet stove that has been with me since the beginning. A big layout workspace, lathe, sanders, drill presses, milling machines, fairly simple. It's a 28 by 30 foot space. I had a 3,000 square foot space before, but it's amazing how well this can work even with 3 people working in it. This is some of the architectural metalwork that I had done once I moved up there with the same first client that I had. It's a steel rail that went up a few flights, and it's all patinaed with no visible hardware. And then the white bars on the left, it's not nearly right, were also aluminum bars that I had made and installed in there. This is another handrail for the same architect. No visible fasteners. Each mount point had to fit on these raised bars from the wall, these wooden pieces, which was fun. And this is the first line of spoons that I had made. It's not exactly, it's kind of the same design as that very first spoon, but this is the first ones that I had put online for Instagram. Some of the architectural commissions that I've done, these little test pieces I did for an architect for cabinet pulls, little forgings. Bookends, I'd never set a stone before, but I thought I would try with these heirloom stones someone gave me, and then I realized that they were heirloom stones, really sank in when I was doing the prongs, and I was like, oh my God. But you just little steps at a time, you work. These are door pulls and architect design, which I'm not sure exactly how they work, but I just followed the drawings. This is a sculpture from a British group. We worked online on how to build. This is like 7-8 feet tall, forged rails. I brought out my portable forge to do these. They were like 3/4 inch solid steel forgings, and something I don't normally do, but it was kind of a blast to work on. Custom hardware for an artist, sanded tapered brass hooks that have little custom threaded studs and washers on them. These are door pulls from the same first architect that I keep doing every year for his next clients. 60 of these for a kitchen or a house, per guest house, per vacation house, per neighbor's vacation house. But they're all welded bronze. I figure out how to piece them out, have them water jet cut, weld them all back together and patina them. So each piece is made out of like 12 pieces, and they get mortised into the wood. This is them being welded. You can see the stack of them behind me. Custom hardware. This was a milled little custom hardware hinges for a woodworker making a cabinet who didn't figure out how the hinges were going to work until he was ready to install them, and then couldn't find what would work. So I helped him design this piece. Then some custom pieces here, candle snuffers, forged stainless and forged brass. Then I started exploring scoring metal and folding it to make similar shapes. Coffee scoops, again, it's kind of similar to the first one. Pie servers, forged steel and stainless steel with brass rivets. Starting to get into wood. You can see the joinery on the lower left side. I thought I'd make a simple lower cost piece, and then I got obsessed with the joinery, and now it's the most difficult thing to make. These are all angle ground sanded from 1/8 inch sheet. I actually do get everything CNC cut when I can, the profiles, because I don't feel like the cost it would take to hand cut them justifies. I mean, no one would buy them probably. They would just be insanely expensive. They're already expensive. But these are all angle ground from thick to thin, and the facet on the handles are all angle ground, because angle grinder is my main tool that I've learned from all the fabrication I've done in the past. More pie servers. These are forged and angle ground sand handles, stainless steel and copper. File work on a stainless spoon, playing around the detail. I started getting into the hydraulic press, the very first and only residency I took in 2019 at Haystack, where I was playing around with hydraulic press to make forms. And these are charred maple handles that they get riveted to. Playing around with different colors, so tinning the bowl for just a different piece. This is all brass that's forged and angle ground to go from thick to thin, and then forged in a swage block for the spoon bowl, and then tinning the bowl for just a little bling. Stainless steel, forged in a swage block, and then black patina on part of it with the brass rivet hole. Cheese sets. So as my hands start to fail, as I get a little bit older and having to do all this work, also be really careful with how you work, because 30 years into it, my hands and back and everything are just falling apart. So now instead of angle grinding, I'm like, how can I build up dimension instead of using an angle grind to take it away? As much as I love sculpting with it on one piece, I usually work at 12 pieces at a time, hopefully 24. And I just can't do it without hurting my hands. So building up layers is what I'm exploring now. And that's me forging an oyster knife in my shop. And those are the oyster knives where we have wood handles, and then the forged blades and heat treatments and stuff with that. And that's been great. And that's, I think, the last slide that I have. Thank you. Camera. Is there time for questions? What do we have? If anyone has any questions. Yes.
Photography and photography in these products is really exquisite. Are you shooting those?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's fun. It was very hard to photograph the architectural work. I don't have much great photographs of that also because I was installing jobs when painters were all around and I couldn't get back in afterwards. But having a small piece to play around and bring that back into my practice is great. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
For those perhaps just starting or what you call the life smithing journey,
Yeah.
what would be like your top words of wisdom? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Stay open and curious and not clinging to some idea of what it might be. I mean, I think it's good to have a dream and a passion and just paying attention really well, because you can feel the difference, if you're like really forcing it, you don't feel it soft in here, there's not as much pliability, but when you start to feel, and also patience too, because I think you can try something being like, well, this isn't a permanent decision, right? Let's just try this and see what happens. And then more doors, or you'll get more information to feel, right? And then you start feeling, oh, well, actually that actually feels better than that. So then I'm going to start nudging this way. And I think, I don't know, maybe that would be it. And yeah, don't get into debt, I think is an important one. I mean, the 0% interest credit cards were very helpful, but I also knew I was good with money to make sure that I paid that off, right away, and don't hang on to it and not go past the 0% interest 6 months or whatever that was. So well, I think, yeah, I mean, college was really, I went to Hampshire College, which was a really unusual college, and I was really grateful to have gone. But I hated it. I really hated it. And I think that if I had known more of the craft school world, I think that would have been really interesting. But college, if you're able to go and you're lucky enough to be able to figure out a way to go, it stretched my mind about possibilities. And Hampshire was really interesting. And I think it doesn't have to be Hampshire, but people were doing like really whacked out things, and which was the best piece of advice that I'd gotten there was, you can do anything, like explore and push it and travel and see things, because the more that you do that, the more you're going to be able to feel what is right. And if you're stagnant, it's really hard to push yourself when you're stagnant. You don't have the information to respond to. So I think giving you more information to respond to is going to have a better chance to sort of feel like where home is. And home may change for you too, and to not feel married to that, right? I mean, home might be one thing at one point and another thing at another point. I definitely didn't think I would be doing this. That was not the plan. So, but I'm happy with it. And other things would have been fine too, I'm sure, but following the heart. Yes.
Running your own small business. Can you talk a little bit about the reality of how your time is split, or how much time is spent running the business and how much time is spent actually making and designing work?
Yeah, that's a good question. The business class was so essential to thinking about that. One of the things that I think was so helpful was talking about pricing, and pricing determines that. So, and I keep thinking about doing a workshop on this. It was great to hear that you're about to do some pieces on this, because I think it's so important. But one of the great things in the business class, which was any business, is that you find, what is your billable time and your non-billable time. Non-billable time, which seems weird. You're like, what do you mean? You got to bill for all time. But non-billable time is the stuff you can't tie to a piece. So running the business is non-billable time. And they, throughout there, if you're working 5-day week, that might be 2 days out of the week you're running the business is non-billable time. 3 days of the week is billable. And so you just use that thing of like, all right, I'm going to run the business, schedule blocks of time for 2 days of that week. And the 3 days a week, I have to be making something in the shop, right? And then that's billable time, because when I make a spoon, I calculate how much, I pay attention to how long that takes with the material cost and everything. Or when I'm doing a commission, I'm paying attention to how long it takes to make that particular thing. That's billable time. But you can't bill the client for marketing for the year. You can't bill a client, directly anyways, and that's the non-billable time. So that using that framework to help keep me guiding on my time structure, it's like, I can't, if I'm spending more time running the business than 2 days a week, I can't, it's not sustainable. If I'm, and if I'm not working 3 days a week, and doing other things, then it's not sustainable. So did I just say that? So that's how I try to break it up, and it changes according to how, again, paying attention. Like I used to, do Mondays and Wednesdays office time, or Mondays and Tuesdays office time, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday would be shop time. And I'd have to stick to that in order to be sustainable. And then now, because it's harder for me physically to work a whole day, now I do shop time in the morning. I turn off all devices. I just go into the shop. I have focused shop time for the first half of the day. Then I do office work in the afternoon. And I schedule all my appointments for Friday. And there's time management. I'll get geeky about it. But that's how I figure out how to do that time blocking, to know that it should be a sustainable thing. And how I do my pricing so that it all fits together. Anybody else? Yeah, and
I would love to hear more about doing time management.
oh yeah, well, if anybody, yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to folks about it. And again, I'm trying to compile a way to be able to share more of what I've learned, because it all came like not in the beginning, it came at the end, and I'm like, oh God, I wish I knew this before, because it's so helpful.
Can you also talk a little bit more expansively about how you run how you hire and run interns?
Yeah, so in the beginning, yeah, interns and employees were in Boston. Mass College of Art Design and Montserrat College of Art, and there were schools that taught really great technical skills, and so it was a great pool of people to pull from. In Maine, not so much. And I think also times have changed where people aren't as into staying put. So much is in flux, I think, with everybody. It's a little chaotic, but it's also can be a little freeing. So right now I have a thing that I do that I think works really well. In Boston, it worked well to have a long-term assistant because of the big commissions I had. I had to have people there, for a while. But now with COVID and people shifting around, I do a 3-month assistantship. And I post on Instagram is my main marketing. I post out there to share it. And I say, I have a fall, winter, and spring term, which people can stay longer, but the 3 months seems like a cozy spot for people to try it out. And a lot of people like to see what Maine's about, and also metal workers. And so it's been a really great experience, and not only for them, but for me, but also the community building that I'm seeing happening from it. Oh my God, it's just absolutely amazing. And so I'm hiring blacksmiths, I'm hiring jewelers. They have to have metalworking experience. I can't do training as much anymore because I can't do a lot of the work. And I need someone to be producing in the shop. Sounds very cold, but I need to have people making stuff that's making money. So I can't afford to train from very early career, but I usually ask for people to do 3+ years. Before, earlier in the business, it was okay to train because it was great for both of us to learn, and there was more time to do that. And I would have an entry level and I'd have an experienced person, so that there was a lot of sharing with that. And I think if you can have the room and the patience to sort of figure each other out and what works well for certain people, because everyone will have different strengths, that I found you can always find something for someone to help you out with, and in helping things go. And I think also trying to see if people are okay with doing more than just metal work. Maybe they can be doing admin stuff as well. And I think paying attention to what you're doing and where you can delegate. Like for a while, I was like, how could I delegate? I do this all myself. I just don't understand how I could even pass that off. But for a year, I just kept taking notes of like, what I'm doing is that, can I delegate that? Can I delegate that? Nope, nope. Yeah, oh, there's one, and like, just pay attention to where those little spots are, because you'll find there's more and more spots that you can delegate. And I think it's a better learning experience for whoever's working with you to be part of the whole business too, instead of just the hole driller, or whatever. But the assistantship thing I think is really interesting. I initially thought it was more of a colleague sharing thing, like I would love to go work in somebody's shop. I would love to go work at your shop for 3 months. That'd be amazing. Just to be able to share with each other, what are your strengths? What are your challenges? Because often they're not the same. And then you can learn a lot. And so like shop improvements that have happened the last few years, I've done this assistantship. Oh my God, it's amazing. Because people are like, why is there no light over here? And I'm like, I don't know, I can say, and I'm like, oh, you're right. It's really dark, and so having shop improvements is great. And then blacksmiths bring totally different experience. Jewelers bring totally different experience. And so we're all sharing, and then everyone stays in touch, which is just really sweet, to see. And so I want to build on that as a way to keep the business going, as well as just the community. Like I'm trying to figure out, how do I rent out my house as a bigger community sharing experience for this? It's not just about assistance to keep the shop going. That's a long answer. But Instagram, trying to make connections, people sharing the ideas, inclusive, Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths sharing information. I mean, you co-founding that is so awesome, to be able to have that community where people can go and get a resource, a reference, I think is so great. So encouraging you to create your own communities, as well as finding communities that exist to hire and share and work together. I think it's great. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Kind of.
and I'm fascinated by how you can kind of garner an understanding of someone's experience level from a spoken interview, and like I find myself in those situations just like completely in with everybody.
I hear, yeah. No, I know I've been there too. I'm like, oh yeah, it's great. This is fun. Like, come on, work. And then they get here and I'm like, I didn't ask any questions about what they know or anything, I just was excited to have somebody else in the shop, and like, they seem awesome and they are awesome, but trying to figure out, what do you really need? So I do have an online application that I worked hard to have questions that would help make sure that it was clear to whoever's applying what's involved. So there's a who, what, when, where, but there's also like, what are your goals? What are your skills? What are 3 strengths? What are 3 challenges you have? How do you like to work? What do you want to get out of this? Why do you want to come work with me? What questions do you have for me? Like trying to suss out what it is. And the best question though, actually, and figuring out people, because I also live with them too, I house them, is the last question is, what's your favorite color? And it's amazing. It's amazing what you can find out about somebody, about how they answer that question.
Of like a color and
so it's more out of personality than skill, but maybe not. It's how they, so like blue, that's one answer.
oh, what?
Right? But then somebody else would be like, blue, like the fountain ink pen color blue, because then they go on a little story about like the particular kind of blue and like why they like it, because it's a part of this fountain pen thing. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. I want to have this conversation. Now I get the picture. It's storytelling, I guess, in a way. If anyone's applied and just said blue, I'm sorry, but it just, it's interesting how they answer. And I mean, initially it was just a question just to break up the monotony of my long application, but it actually proved to be kind of interesting to see how people answer about how their minds work, and their curiosity, or I don't know. And I don't think it's an end all, it's like, like the Monty Python thing. What's your favorite color? Blue. No, I mean, orange or whatever it is. It's tricky though, I mean, I've had several now in the last few years, and they've all been absolutely amazing, and they all have completely different backgrounds, completely different strengths, completely different challenges, but it's worked really, really well. There's been one time where somebody didn't have as much experience as I thought, and it was challenging, but you stay open to it and try to be creative with how can we work together to make this great, and the 3 months is a great term, because if it's really not a good fit long-term, it's not long-term, it's 3 months. And I think in those situations, I think it's clear to both people that this isn't really a long-term option here. It just doesn't seem to work really well. It's not, but that one situation was barely that. I mean, it's all been really great. And I don't feel like, I think that application is helpful. And then I do a Zoom call to talk to people and seeing examples of work too, for people who are applying for the job. I mean, so there's a question about wanting an assistant, but people who want to look for work, having really good photographs of your pieces, and not just overall, but detail is really important. And if you're not liking the detail of your stuff, then really work hard to make that, find ways like taking workshops or practicing to make it really good, because I think, yeah, the quality of the work is often a bottom line, because it's like, okay, I can see they have skills in detail and finish work. If they have production work skills, great, because it can be really monotonous to make, a gazillion holes. But yeah, I mean, it's tricky. And maybe there's something where we you help with some colleague, peers, and be like, hey, can you help me? I'll be happy to do that if you trusted me to like look at some applications or whatever, and just have somebody. It's always, I'm always making decisions on my own, and it's really tricky. And I find that when I actually do ask for help or reach out, I'm like, oh my God, this is so much more A, fun, and B, so helpful, because I don't know it all, and I can't see around the corner, and these miss a lot. And then you have two people to bounce things off of. It just makes things it's a better decision overall. It's more fair to everyone involved. So it is nice to have that. So can I ask you next time?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal.
So in our culture, we constantly hear this a phrase that's like, know your worth, right? Like we're always confronted with that question. And as somebody who's really new to metalsmithing, what I love about it is that I'm thinking more about knowing my how now. And like, so I'm like constantly thinking about that tension between knowing my why and knowing my how. So I'm curious if you could like sort of speak to that tension, or if there's the third thing that you're like, no, it's this. I look back, at my work, my career, and I don't like to know your
Know your why, WHY. I've never heard that before. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like knowing your why. I mean, how do you know why? I mean, I think I'm sorry. I don't know if I agree with that. Personally, it might drive some people to be able to inspire them, but it wouldn't inspire me, because I don't know. I have no idea why. I mean, again, I think it's gut reactions, right? If you feel a gut reaction on anything in life, do you really need to know why? I mean, if you, and if I knew what some of the stuff I had to do to be where I am now, I probably wouldn't do it. If I knew why or how, I wouldn't have done it. I mean, there's been a lot of really, really hard times of like stressed out with deadlines and things not going right, and working all night when I thought I was done, and just like, oh, if I knew that, and as far as what, if I had to answer why the different forks in the road, I think I would run the other way, honestly. So as far as knowing your how, I think that's a better question. I do, because you're like, I feel this and I want that. So how can I get there? You know, I mean, I think that's more important of like, and is this the right time to get there? You know, also, because I think that urge of wanting the next thing, maybe not as healthy, right? To sort of, because you're not listening as much. If you're like looking over there, you're not paying attention to here. And I think that that is important to really, because I think a lot of us lose touch with what's here, you know, because so many people are telling us what the why is or how is, but that's not maybe what we need, you know, right then and there. And I think that's the hardest thing to really tap into, because things are just so busy. And you know, for anything in life, I just think that's the most important thing. But again, just not trying to chase after something as much either. But I know there are times where I'm in a position where like, I do not like this. I don't like it. And instead of making a rash decision, which a lot of these were rash decisions, but I did think about them a little bit before I do them, but taking a leap and going somewhere where I don't know anything, I have no idea who's there, what can I, like Maine, I had no idea who was up there, what was happening. It was just like, I don't know, Maine's beautiful. Let's just see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea. And, but I did think, am I okay with whatever happens to be in this space? Like, does this environment look like where I want to be? Even if something completely different happens, which it did, there's many different things happen that I didn't expect, very drastic, dramatic things, as well as good things. But I remember thinking, but I want to be up here in this environment. So I'm just going to see what happens. And so there was no why. Maybe there was a why of being like, because I want space and nature and I want to be near the ocean and I want a lower cost of living. But other than that, I'm not sure. So maybe there's little whys, but I don't know if you need that. A little why, lowercase y. I don't know.